Jacinta Carroll is the head of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute Counter-Terrorism Policy Centre. She joins us for analysis from Canberra. Jacinta Carroll, thanks very much for joining us. We heard earlier from the French President Francois Hollande, who said there's no denying the terrorist nature of this attack. Is it fair to assume that the French authorities are treating this as a terrorist attack? And how are they likely to respond?
Oh, good afternoon. And yes, the statement that has come through just now from President Hollande demonstrates that they assess it is a terrorist attack. But also earlier today, Australian time, we did hear from the French prosecutors that the investigation had been handed over to their counter-terrorism investigation unit. So it seems that fairly early on, the French had put their counter-terrorism arrangements into motion, although they would still be collecting information to determine exactly who was responsible and how this was carried out.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, of course, France has been on high alert. Certainly a state of emergency has been in place since those attacks in Paris in November. So inevitably there will be questions about how this managed to take place in Nice.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely correct. There has been a state of emergency in place for 8 months now. And look, that hasn't been without controversy. You could imagine if we had a state of emergency in Australia for some months, for example, after the Lindt Cafe siege, then people will be beginning to say, look, this is impacting on our way of life. And there's been a lot of debate in France, in the French Parliament and in the French media and amongst community about how long that would last. And of course, at his Bastille Day speech yesterday, President Hollande had actually foreshadowed lifting the state of emergency at the end of this month. Obviously, with the attack happening and other sources of information, the French government has decided to continue with this. But I would say also it's important to note not only the terrible incident today and the tragedy surrounding that, but also what hasn't happened on Bastille Day and what hasn't happened in the last few months. There haven't been significant terrorist attacks previously in that time since Paris, since the Paris attack in November. French authorities have disrupted a high number of plots, and also we know that Bastille Day itself was named by Islamic State in particular as a particular target, and France itself has been named as a target. And with all of the celebrations happening across France yesterday, it was none of the big events, no hard targets, sports stadium, the Champs-Élysées celebrations. Whoever has done this has had to resort to a very soft target of holidaymakers in an open environment in a smaller regional area such as Nice.
Jacinta Carroll, how would you describe the method of attack, the use of a truck to kill people?
Yeah, well, the use of a truck is an interesting one. We haven't seen that a lot in Western countries, but it sadly is a very, it's not an unusual method of terrorist attack over the last few decades in other places. So we have seen that during the Intifada periods in Israel. This is a normal mode of attack by Palestinian groups. We've also seen it in Africa. The Dar es Salaam attack is one of the most notable, and also a decade ago in Jakarta. So using trucks, whether it is just to drive into masses of people or into a building or through gates, isn't unusual, or having a truck that is full of explosives to act as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. It's not unusual in those environments, and that again tends to suggest that if this is a terrorist attack, that it's been inspired by these. We've also seen with both Islamic State and Al-Qaeda that over the past 2 years in particular, they've been giving detailed instructions on how to undertake a variety of attacks with things that are easily available in a normal environment, such as a knife or a handgun or whatever. But they've also given detailed instructions on how to use a vehicle for this type of attack, and also one that would detonate. And that is in their online magazines, Dabiq and Inspire.
Yeah, questions will also be raised about the full intentions of the driver of the truck, who was subsequently shot dead by police, given there are reports that the back of the truck was full of small arms and grenades.
Yeah, that's interesting, and really we just have to wait to find out what is in there. The reports that we're hearing at the moment appear to be some speculation. So there are a couple of options there, a couple of hypotheses that French investigators are probably working with. One would be that this was a vehicle-borne explosive attack that's gone wrong. Perhaps there was another target, they couldn't get in there, perhaps something went wrong. And, you know, the guys who do this, they have some good instructions, but it's not often that they're necessarily professionals at putting together explosives. So more of these things go wrong than not. So it could be that.
And Jacinta, how will the French authorities investigate this particular attack? Will there be an assumption that Islamic State militants are behind it?
Oh, look, the French investigators are very professional and they've been dealing with this for a long time, this threat. So they'll be looking at all possibilities, and as they develop their various hypotheses of what it might be, they'll also be matching that against broader threat indicators that they're aware of through the course of their normal investigations. That is their police, their security service, and very importantly, the liaison that they're doing with partners across Europe and also with the US and Australia and other partners. So they'll be actively seeking to find out, hypothesise on what it might be, but also collect information to prove or disprove those different theories as they try to work out what's happening. But in the meantime, of course, there's a second element of what do we do right now to protect people. And French authorities, again, they're at a high level of emergency and readiness, and they will be actively identifying all of the other investigative leads that they have. Where might another attack come from? And they will be, as we saw after Paris and as we saw after Brussels, actively looking to roll up any potential threat and bringing that threat in line with the recent attack.
The Australian government has updated its information for Australians travelling in France. More broadly, how is the Australian government likely to respond?
Well, the Australian government has had a high threat level alert for almost 2 years now. So from the Australian government perspective, they're already doing a lot in terms of protecting Australians, Australia's interests abroad as well, and they'll be continuing to do that, but with this as additional information to determine, okay, is the threat level right? Does this look like it links into any of the other indicators that we're seeing in the Australian environment, and do we need to do anything else? Very importantly, of course, Australia is a partner with France in many ways and would be looking to assist French investigators with anything that might assist from the Australian side, and also looking to continue to work with France in the military operations in the Middle East as part of the coalition.
And this attack in Nice has been described as a soft target because of the large crowds involved. So many people, thousands of people watching Bastille Day celebrations there on the promenade. How difficult is it for French authorities, and or in any other country where an attack may be possible, to protect the general public, particularly where there's a large gathering?
Look, it's a really good question, and this is always the issue. Terrorists will hit where they can, and authorities in free democracies such as ours and such as France want to ensure that the freedoms of the country of their country are not unduly put out because of security concerns. So what I take from this is that if this was an Islamic State directed attack, it wasn't something sophisticated or showing particular capability as we saw with the attack, with the coordinated attacks in Paris in November. But also remember that in Paris, as terrible as that was, one of the targets, the Stade de France, the football stadium, the attackers weren't able to get into the stadium and therefore weren't able to kill or harm the tens of thousands of people in there. So what we see now is that, well, they know they can't attack those, so where else can we go? And it's impossible in a free society to clamp everything down all the time and maintain our values and our way of life.
And Jacinta Carroll, would French authorities and investigators operate on the premise that there may have been accomplices involved in this attack, and there could therefore be the further threat of attacks in France.
Yeah, look, certainly the French would be actively looking from the moment that this occurred to potential other attacks, whether they're in Nice, in that region, or elsewhere across France, or anywhere where there's a French interest, such as their embassies. So they would have been looking to that immediately, and particularly because we've seen that as part of Islamic State's modus operandi with Brussels, Istanbul and Paris. So they would definitely be looking at all of those others and just making sure that there aren't any, or trying to disrupt any potential attacks. Also, being on the lookout for any copycat-inspired attacks. A lot of the ways that the Islamist terrorist groups work is to just say to their supporters and recruiters, you can do this yourself, pick a target that's local and do this yourself. Others may be inspired by the Nice attack. Some of the speculation in France at the moment from some of my colleagues in Europe is that the reports coming out of Nice that the truck driver was a 31-year-old local resident, originally from Tunisia, is that he used his local knowledge of access, possibly access to the vehicle, and certainly where there would be a mass casualty target.
Jacinta Carroll, Head of the Counter-Terrorism Policy Centre at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, thanks very much.
Thank you.